what does it mean when they're saying directly that, so and so, not dwelling on the title or the name too much, is in every molecule, atom, and particle in the universe? If such a statement were to be coming across, of hearing something of that nature, not only how are we processing that, more so going forward from here and now, how are we moving with that? How would we be living with that? What would that mean to us? Like when we're hearing like that, God source, whatever you want to call it respectively, is in every atom and particle in the universe. How would that work? And upon hearing that, regardless of the compliance and the congruency upon hearing such a statement, which is not just necessarily physiologically triggered, it's more than the physiological trigger. It's seeing how our subconsciousness is shrouded and charaded with the surface level of the polarities, and the surface level of the polarities is kind of like dwelling upon, for however reason, of the deepest transition you could come to, the deepest transition to whatever unique surface level external location you're in within the dream theater. How is it that how is it that we're like, forgetting the deep subconsciousness communication? Because the deep subconsciousness communication is that which is congruent with detecting the purity in perhaps anything and all things. But that's the thing. Our surface level physiological character is not necessarily per se down with that, because it has a unique convolution of multifaceted programs of unique, leaning ratios towards ignorance, and a unique ignorance. And it's not necessarily good or bad, but it could be in turn detrimental and unhealthy. So it's seeing the discrepancy between where the innocence is leveraged in too much ignorance, and from that a neutral to not neutral seed grows in towards more of a forgetting and leaving the state of innocence to go towards detrimentality. So how would we live with that? How would we live with even such a notion? Like when certain traditions, and I'm not naming traditions. I'm not bringing up other traditions because it will sound biased. I'm just saying it for a neutral example. Like, what would it mean if like a tradition told you that their so-and-so quote unquote religion end quote is saying that their God is in every particle and atom and cell in the universe? How would that even work? Well, it's a simple product of delineating the individuation of the elements in the channels. So as we delineate the individual element channels and forms, they're expressing themselves in different ways and making new creations, such as the human, all the way to whatever resides in the further off material world, which is not necessarily good or bad. Just be prepared if you're going towards that direction. And how are the highest heaven creating their new fucking things beyond this fucking solar system and galaxy? Like, how is that coming to be respectively? And I'm just saying it because I'm trying to make a point. I'm trying to stir my own soup for purity, for long-term purity, for long-term, what is God's ultimate test for us? His perspective of perfection is totally different than what we think it is, no matter what thought intrudes us temporarily or not. And that's the thing. It's based on the participation of the ratio polarities of this material life, there are things which will casually to not casually to somewhere in between, casually, not casually, intrude our space. And if we shift to the grace and the equilibrium and the seasonal vantage point, we would know what to clear and what not to clear on the most advanced level recognizing the harmony reciprocation with such a top-down God being. Like, I'm talking, like, I'm putting my mind, body, and soul alignment to the God of all gods, understanding how that works. How would it work if God is in every fucking particle and cell in the universe? How the fuck would that work, respectively? And I don't mean to, like, you know, trigger anybody. It's not about that. It's not about that surface level, detrimental, shrouded, fucking ignorant, petty ass baby Gerber poop shit. It has nothing to do with that at all. It's about seeing the longevity of your soul. It's about seeing the preservation and the hygiene of your mind. It's about seeing the, you know, the eventual, you know, graceful, luxurious transitions to the body, and how the body is relating to all the other tribes on a subtle level, but not directly. We're all indirectly connected. Everything is indirectly connected, because there's a thread of the no space neutrino ocean, which in one turn it's simultaneously associated with all things and not associated with all things. So if you see the elements from the top down, before fire came some sort of notion of light, and go and like, you know, look at all my content neutrally and see the bigger picture before, you know, some irrelevant, ignorant, petty stuff comes at my way. It has nothing to do with that. What it has to do is seeing how simultaneously there's an association and a disassociation going on regarding what is self inhabiting and individualizing itself on a very most advanced particular channel. And that particular channel is paradoxically in the neutrino ocean. And before the neutrino ocean, every particle has a origination spark infusion of some type of dark molecule light reception particle molecule. And within that reception particle molecule, let me check the battery. Gee whiz. Good. Okay. So within that reception particle molecule, there's a fine line material neutral particle molecule, and there's a fine line, you know, spiritual neutral particle molecule. And those are the essence of the empty space coordinates of the spiritual XYZ coordinates of the neutrino ocean for our bottom-up human understanding. Because within the neutrino ocean, everything is in the neutrino ocean. As mentioned in the previous video, all the elements are in, you know, coagulation together on a metaphysical level, and they're all inhabiting the same space. And per the particular fusion and combustions and interactions and, you know, and mergings and meldings based on, you know, the synergy alchemy of the object that we're infusing our subjective concepts into, or our conceptual subjective energies to, quote unquote subjective energies, because it's all external to internal. And what's more external, you're just going towards the direction of external, which is lesser real, but it's still real to a mathematical degree. And if you're doing it for the spiritual, then you're going internal, which is more and more everlastingly, paradoxically, reverse engineer, more real is the endless energy of source. Because we're trying to understand what God is most legitimately and most fairly, beyond all the fucking, like, you know, just the fake energies. I'm not even directing it to anybody, not even a person anymore. It's just the enigma of an energy of fakeness. It's the enigma of an energy of not truth, too much arrogance, too much polarization, too much you've been immersed in the bullshit, pretty much, and now you've forgotten your true purpose. Has nothing to do with, you know, even the titles respectively, but or the false characters, because the false character, you have to be careful with that, because it's propping you up and it's setting you up for a subtle expectation of you needing attention, and the grace of solitude, based on how much you have practiced it, the more solitude you have, the less attention you need, because you're already self-fulfilling and self-energizing yourself with all the attention is already given to you when you're by yourself. So it's a paradoxical level, and I know there's discrepancies and nuances between the fields within the fields within the fields, but you're alone in different contexts. You're always alone in your own energy vessel, you know? You're always, and then that expresses itself in your too, you know, your forgotten subconscious spirit communicator, the purity of everything, and your individuated self, and how you got to your individuated self from your original soul conception to how you've been just kind of like from different standpoints of a deep, spiritual macro processor systematic system. We're navigating our pursuits based on what we need for our freaking evolution. Because if you want to upgrade your evolution, then you're not just going to be one race. Like any race could have been any other race in the past life, and any race that you are right now, it's a big probability you could be a race you probably don't like based on your mental psychological responsibilities and cause and effects that you have interpercolated and reciprocated and related and intercepted as and accepted as something of a thought program, when it's not necessarily like a more wholesome truth. So how would God, like, we're trying to decipher God. So this is why I'm neutrally saying, is there a progressive like Vaishnavite movement or not? And read between the fine lines between that sentence. Because if you don't understand what I'm saying, then you're not going to be living it. But if you do understand what I'm saying, your actions will be intermerged, and you will actually live what you actually preach, rather than just using it as a 3D, 4D, 5D, respectively, facade to carry out your life and to sustain your life. It's bigger than that. We're seeing the neutral Vaishnavite movement on the highest dimension, beyond the Bhumandala, and eventually, hopefully, within the balance from the Bhumandala to the Brahmaloka / Satyaloka, eventually within that, realistic construct of a model of a map labyrinth, kind of like a maze zone or a zone maze, then we have to maturely be aware and reciprocate with the rules of that material construct. Yeah, we could have this, postulation of, who's above what and who's beyond what, but that's not really doing anything. You're just cheating out your own awareness of the depths of the material construct, realities and rules and laws of how things function in different densities, period. But so God's main trick is how he's controlling who gets to remember what, who gets to forget what, who gets to have amnesia, for better or for worse, who gets to have enlightenment, spiritual remembrance, and sustain that for better or for worse, based on what this new vessel is ready for and has worked to with its spiritual efforts. This is beyond the Gita. This is beyond all that. It is. And if you can't read, because I'm living the principle of it. I'm showcasing, I'm upfront with it, and I've been upfront with it before you fucking heard of me, probably before you were even born, because the variables are scrambled in a neutral spiritual way. We're not what we are in this life, but we are what we are because we're a reflection of how we're participating with other reflections. And that's just the cost of the participation game of what it really means to explore our deep spiritual evolution, because the deep spiritual evolution is simultaneously extreme neutral extreme polarities. We're on and the final three for our significant self is, as we're attempting to realize, to be on par with the equilibrium states of the different prime polarities of ourselves, the material aspects of ourselves from the origin and the spiritual aspects of ourselves from our origin. Those two need each other for its new evolution, that third evolution. So it's that third evolution of you. And that third evolution, that's the only thing that really matters, because pure source creator, the source of the universe, is going to preserve that and work with you how you could have the best outcome possible regardless of any circumstance or situation. We're just not perceiving it that way, because there's a big 50-50. There's a big, within like the shadow of the earth, beyond the shadow of the earth on a higher octave level. And I don't mean to be overly optimistic sometimes. There has to be an equilibrium state, space, location where it's like beyond like the suffering. There has to be a place beyond the suffering, and how we bring that place of beyond suffering to this plane is based on where we came from, and where we came from, we're ultimately possibly attempting to weave that energy within the interferometry field to exalt the constructivality of all the elements, to actually in turn live the rhetoric and actually prove the rhetoric and actually surpass and transcend the rhetoric of what anybody's really saying, because in the end it takes a specific multifaceted action plan to actually really accomplish whatever your objective is. And the root of accomplishing the objective is recognizing the different aspects and expressions and the variations of the pure spirituality, possibly within anything or not. That just depends on your intellectual maturity, your physical maturity, and your new resetted energetic maturity, respectively. So the thing is, how would God be in every freaking particle? Because the elements, respectively, they have their own top-down class attribution of what's more inner with them and what's more outer with them. And, you know, in an Instagram video I did a while back, I looked at it as the first element, respectively, just in this casual neutral model, the first element being the no space, the second element being the spark, intelligent light consciousness that's unfiltered from the duality, and then the third element would be, respectively, the higher exalted macro fire, respectively. And from that creating a unique duality of darkness and light, you know, like it's a post intelligence, but it's not necessarily, it's a creativity. It's more of like, you know, it's the feminine has been, this is the origin of the feminines, you know, the origin of the feminines is the fire has been lit ablaze within the non-duality of itself and the duality within itself, and then after the fire is the wind. Because like on the Vedic cosmological level, like I've already peeped game, like I already have, like, you know, the research, like a library is what a library is. And you don't have to, do you memorize your whole library? Like this is me, if anybody wants to pull that scholarly, you know, archetype on me, or that scholarly type of indoctrinated BS on me, has nothing necessarily to do with that, but it could. It's like, what are we doing it for? It has nothing to do with the scholarly attitude of like, oh, you have to know every shloka, you have to know every fucking Bible verse, and you have to know all like the exact thing. Well, that's what the fucking computer in the library is for. So it's like going beyond whatever you're talking about. So in an Instagram video about like 2 years ago, from me studying different Vedic cosmological concepts already in the past, respectively, like, you know, just focusing within this life, that no one necessarily knows what anybody else has done, because that's an act of an assumption. And within that act of an assumption, there's clear basic standard neutral ignorance that you're not necessarily knowing, because you're pre-predicating falsely and projecting falsely upon something you don't necessarily know what something else is at its fucking essence and root, respectively. So the thing is, how would God be in every particle? Well, the no space being original God, first element, second element being intelligence, light, consciousness, third element being fire, fourth element being wind, fifth element being water, and then the sixth element being the earth. And if you're like, and if you're like, you know, you have a different machination of your own physiological perception from your bottom up, then maybe the water could be the sixth for you, and the earth could be the fifth for you, or it could be completely arranged differently per, you know, whatever your energetic, mechanical, you know, physiological, mechanical rigidity is. So the thing is, God is the light in every particle. He's reflecting the light, but he's not necessarily with that or of that. He's reflecting the light, and as he's reflecting upon himself between the first and second element, the no space element and the light space element, he's reflecting that to create the fire. And as he's creating the fire, that fire resides in every particle, because it's a reflection, downpour, animation particle, post fusion and infusion simultaneously of what the light is. And the light is it's of God and with God, but everything else that contains the reflection of light, God's not of that or with that, because he's delineated it to be like that. So that's how you decipher what does it really mean when they're saying God is in every particle and atom and cell. It means that. It means the reflection of his light, his pre-light, is animate in all other things, because he's reflecting that energy, and we're just, everything else is just using it how it will, and they forgot that it's God's energy, because everything is God's energy. God is in every particle. and atom and cell, and that's how. Part two, obviously. It's the reflection downpour that every inanimate object is using.